Angel Island, the picturesque 1.2 square mile island off the coast of the San Francisco Bay, may seem unassuming at first glance. However, it holds a dark past. The story of Angel Island Immigration Station is rooted in decades of prejudice and discrimination towards Asian ethnic groups, especially the Chinese. As the gateway to America for many, Angel Island represents years of racism and hardships for Asian immigrants in America, struggling to build a new life for themselves. Chinese immigration began with the American Gold Rush. Entranced by the prospects of gold, by 1851 an estimated 25,000 Chinese came to a newly industrializing America in hopes of prosperity, only to discover that this promise of wealth was an illusion. Mining was dangerous and gold was scarce. Many found that jobs were difficult to find, and often they were unable to even get food to eat. Left with no other options, the desperate immigrants were exploited by America's growing railroad companies, who were in need of cheap labor. Although the work was back-breaking and dangerous, the Chinese workers only received about half the sum of payment a white worker would receive. American railroad companies began to favor hiring Chinese workers for cheap, bringing more and more Chinese into America. The speedy construction of the Transcontinental Railroad was at the price of hundreds of Chinese lives. After the Transcontinental Railroad was completed, the U.S. was hit by a major financial crisis, and many Americans blamed the Chinese for occupying the jobs, worrying that they might be squeezed out of their own. As the Chinese population grew, anti-Chinese sentiment swelled. They were openly mocked, ridiculed in the newspapers, and attacked on the streets. Many believed that the Chinese threatened the integrity of the American racial composition. To address these rising concerns, the United States sought to adopt anti-Chinese immigration policies while still being on good diplomatic terms with China, who is a major trade partner. Chinese and American relationships were already strained by this time due to various trade wars. The United States would continue to pass increasingly restrictive laws until in 1882, the Chinese Exclusion Act, the first American law to explicitly prohibit immigration based on one's nationality, was created. This law marked the beginning of a 60-year era of Chinese exclusion. Although laborers were banned, family members of existing Chinese citizens in America, diplomats, students, and merchants were still allowed. Note that this all could have been prevented if the United States government passed minimum wage labor laws. However, these laws would only be passed 50 years in the future. In 1910, Angel Island Immigration Station was opened. Conditions in Angel Island were dirty and cramped. The immigrants were forced to endure long interrogations that could even span over the course of years. Even though it was dubbed the Ellis Island of the West, Angel Island was not similar to the Western Immigration Station. While Angel Island mostly processed East Asian immigrants, 97% of which were Chinese, Ellis Island welcomed European immigrants, such as those from countries like France and Italy. These European immigrants were seen as easier to assimilate and desired in contrast to the Chinese. These conditions were also pressing on the immigrants' mental health. Records have shown how one woman even committed suicide upon the news that she and her sons would not be landed. Additionally, poems written in Chinese have been found engraved on the walls of the barracks, describing their suffering and anguish while being trapped in the station. One poem reads, "How was I to know that I would become a prisoner suffering in the wooden building? The barbarian's abuse is really difficult to take." These poems give a haunting, somber description of the detainees' experiences at the station. They detail how they were treated by the workers and how they longed to be free. The 1906 San Francisco earthquake led to much of the city records being lost. Using this to their advantage, thousands of Chinese immigrants claimed to be born in the United States as citizens. Because the Chinese could not naturalize as citizens until the Exclusion Act was repealed in 1943, this was especially relevant because it allowed them to use their citizenship to bring over their children. However, many Chinese took this opportunity to make money by selling the paperwork, instead, or additionally, bringing a stranger from China with them to America. This person would have abandoned their family name and assumed a new false identity as the child of this father, thus the name Paper Son. Today, Angel Island is an important historical landmark, national park, and museum. One of its main exhibits are the poems carved on the walls of the barracks. For the Chinese community, It symbolizes the discriminations and hardships that needed to be overcome in order to survive. Many of the immigrants settled in towns and cities scattered across the country, although much of the population lived in California. The immigrants clustered together, forming ethnic enclaves, most notably San Francisco Chinatown. Chinatowns are also scattered across the country, such as in many large cities such as New York and Chicago. Whereas white businesses shunned the Chinese, they were able to become self-employed by starting small businesses in the Chinatowns. Community organizations in these enclaves began providing the services that would have come with U.S. citizenship, such as a legal representative and health services. The thriving businesses and tight-knit communities of Chinatown were molded by the very racism that drove them away. In conclusion, the story of Angel Island is a journey of resilience, discrimination, and survival. Their experiences were shaped by the controversial debate of Chinese immigration and the diplomacy between China and America. The will of the immigrants to find a better future for their families and themselves is an amazing tale reflected in the station's long history.